I. The invitation seemed innocent enough. I had no reason to think that anything would go wrong when I agreed to visit my niece's house, but nothing is ever as it seems, is it? I remember the night before I was set to go. There was a strange feeling in the pit of my stomach. Something felt off. It wasn't the excitement of seeing family, nor the usual warmth I felt when visiting her. No, this was different. But I pushed it aside, trying to ignore the nagging voice in my head that warned me something unexpected was coming. The next afternoon, I arrived at her place. My niece Lily was always a bright, bubbly soul, someone you couldn't help but adore. So when I stepped through the front door, I expected the usual chaos of laughter, clutter, and the scent of something delicious baking in the oven. Instead, I was greeted by an unsettling silence. "Lily?" I called out. But my voice felt too loud in the stillness. No response. I called again, but this time I was more cautious, as if I were intruding on something I wasn't supposed to see. It's hard to explain. But there was something about that moment that made me feel like I was stepping into an unfamiliar world, like I had crossed a line that shouldn't have been crossed. I decided to search the house for her, stepping slowly through the living room, my mind racing with confusion. When I finally found her, she was sitting on the couch, her legs curled up beneath her. Her eyes were wide, her face pale, and the once lively energy she always exuded was gone. I knew instantly that something was wrong. "Lily, what's going on? You okay?" She looked up at me. But for a moment, she didn't speak. It was as if she were trying to find the right words, or perhaps she didn't know what to say at all. Finally, she whispered, "I didn't want you to see this." Her voice cracked, and my heart immediately began to race. "See what?" Then she gestured toward the other side of the room. I turned, my eyes locking onto something that sent a chill down my spine. There, sprawled across the floor, was a letter. The sight of it made my skin crawl. It was something I was not prepared to see, not in my wildest dreams. A letter that would forever change the way I looked at everything, and I wasn't prepared for the truth it held. But there was more. As I bent down to pick up the letter, my hands trembling, a photo slipped out from between the pages. My mind could barely process the image as my eyes scanned it. My niece standing in a dark room, her arms wrapped around someone I didn't recognize. A man whose face was blurred out, but the intimacy of the image was clear. I stood there frozen as I pieced it together. My niece wasn't just in trouble, she was hiding something. But what could it be? And why hadn't she told me sooner? "Lily," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Who is this?" Her response came slowly, but it hit like a ton of bricks. It's my husband." Her eyes welled up with tears. "But he's not the man I thought he was, and neither am I." I felt a lump form in my throat. My niece, married to a man I had once thought was perfect for her, was now revealing secrets I couldn't have fathomed. I had no idea how deep this rabbit hole went, but I knew I was about to find out. As I tried to comfort her, she told me everything. "I thought it was just a phase," she admitted. "But it's been going on for months. I've been hiding it from everyone, including you. I didn't want you to know. I didn't want anyone to know." My heart was heavy, but at the same time, a burning curiosity began to take over. What had driven her to this? Why would she hide something like this from me, from the family? I was a part of her life, a part of her support system. And yet, she had kept this secret locked away, hoping no one would ever find out. "What do you mean?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. Lily looked away for a moment, as if gathering the courage to confess something she had been holding in for far too long. "He's been cheating on me." The words stung like an open wound, and I couldn't help but gasp. "But how do you know?" She nodded toward the letter on the floor, her face hardening. "I caught him. He didn't know I was home, but I was, and I saw everything." The confession hung in the air like an accusation. The man she had married, the man she had trusted, had betrayed her in the most devastating way. but I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear the rest of it. What did you see, Lily? Her gaze locked with mine, and I could see the pain in her eyes. I saw him with another woman. A woman I knew. A woman I trusted. And they weren't just talking. They were together in a way I never imagined possible. And it wasn't just once. It was happening over and over again. Right under my nose. The silence between us grew heavier. I felt her pain, her heartbreak, but I also felt something else. A strange, forbidden curiosity about the man who had deceived her. My mind kept racing back to that photo, the closeness, the intimacy. Was there more? Was there more to this story that I wasn't seeing yet? Lily, what did you do? My voice was barely a whisper. But I needed to know. She swallowed hard and I could see the inner battle playing out across her face. I confronted him. And then he left. I blinked in confusion. He left? Just like that? She nodded, her hands shaking. Yeah, he left me. He didn't even try to explain himself, he just walked out the door and that was it. I felt a cold rage begin to bubble inside me. The man who had betrayed my niece, shattered her trust and left her broken. He was gone without a second thought. It made my blood boil. How could someone do that to the person they supposedly loved? But then, something even darker began to unfold. As Lily spoke, her words began to change. I don't even know who I am anymore, she whispered. I feel like I've lost myself in all of this. And I don't know how to get out of it. My mind raced as I considered what she was saying. Was this just about her marriage? Or was there something more to it? Something deeper that she wasn't ready to admit? She had been through so much, but was there more hiding beneath the surface? Lily, you need to tell me everything, I urged. My voice filled with a new intensity. What else is there? Her eyes met mine again, and for the first time, I saw something in them. Something I wasn't sure I wanted to see. I cheated too, she admitted barely above a whisper. I froze, the air thick with tension. What? My mind couldn't comprehend the weight of her words. You cheated? She nodded slowly, the tears now falling freely from her eyes. It wasn't planned. I didn't mean for it to happen. But I met someone, and I couldn't stop myself. The revelation hit me harder than anything else. Not only had her husband betrayed her, but she had betrayed him too. The whole thing, the lies, the cheating, the broken trust, had spiraled into something far more complicated than I had ever imagined. But I'm not proud of it, she whispered, her voice filled with regret. I didn't want it to happen, but now I'm stuck. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if I even can. In that moment, I realized the complexity of the situation. My niece was trapped, not just by her husband's actions, but by her own. And now, everything had changed. There was no going back. The silence that followed Lily's confession was unbearable. Her words hung in the air, heavy with regret, shame, and guilt. I could see how much it tore her apart just to admit it. You didn't mean for it to happen, I repeated, almost as if trying to convince myself. But deep down, I knew that there was more to it than that. You couldn't stop yourself? The question came out sharper than I intended, the anger and confusion rising in my chest. She shook her head, looking like a fragile version of the girl I once knew. It's not that simple. It wasn't about wanting to hurt him. It was about something I lost, something I thought I had with him, but it wasn't there anymore. Her voice quivered as if she were searching for words that could make sense of the mess her life had become. I clenched my fists, trying to control the whirlwind of emotions inside me. How could I look at her the same way now? How could I see my niece, the girl who had grown up in my arms, who had once been a symbol of innocence and hope, like this? But then again, wasn't that what betrayal did to you? It made everything black and white, even when there was so much gray. Lily wiped away the tears, though more kept falling. She wasn't looking at me anymore. Her gaze was fixed somewhere distant, lost in the chaos of her thoughts. I felt invisible, she said, her voice a mere whisper. Like I wasn't enough. Like everything I did was never good enough for him. And then She trailed off, unable to finish her sentence. She didn't need to, but I needed to understand. Did you love him? I asked. A part of me already knowing the answer but needing to hear her say it. Her face twisted in pain. I do. But love doesn't fix everything, Aunt Mia. Sometimes it makes it worse. It makes you cling to something that's already gone. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I didn't know how to respond. Could love truly not fix everything? I had always believed it did. I had always believed in the power of love to heal wounds, to mend the broken parts of us. But now, hearing her speak so brokenly about the man she had loved, he who had betrayed her, I couldn't help but feel the weight of her despair. Who was it, Lily? The question slipped out of me before I could stop it. Who did you cheat with? She hesitated, looking at the floor as if the name would burn her lips. It was Greg. Greg. The name sent a shockwave through me. I'd known Greg for years. He was a friend of the family, someone who had always been there. The last person I ever expected to be involved in something like this. Greg? I repeated, the disbelief creeping into my voice. But how could you? She looked at me, her eyes full of guilt. It wasn't planned. It wasn't supposed to happen. He was always there for me when he wasn't around. And I needed someone, Aunt Mia. I was lost, and Greg, he was there, and he listened to me. He made me feel seen when I thought I was invisible to everyone else. I didn't mean for it to go this far. The truth hit me harder than anything. Greg wasn't just some random stranger who had seduced her. He was someone she trusted, someone who knew her better than almost anyone else. And that made it even worse. It wasn't just betrayal from her husband anymore. It was betrayal on both sides, an intricate web of lies, hurt, and desperation. I felt sick. My stomach churned as I imagined the two of them together, behind everyone's back. It made me question everything I knew about Greg. How long had this been going on? How many times had they crossed the line before Lily had finally come to the realization that she was trapped in this web of lies? You don't understand, Aunt Mia, Lily said, her voice desperate now. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know who else to turn to. The man I married was a stranger to me, and Greg made me feel alive again. He made me feel important, like I mattered. The words stung, cutting through my heart. She had fallen for Greg's attention, his compliments, and his promises. But I couldn't help but feel for her. I couldn't help but understand. In her world, everything had been slipping away, and sometimes people do desperate things when they feel invisible, unloved, or unnoticed. But then, as the pieces of the puzzle started falling into place, I realized that the worst part wasn't just the affair. It wasn't even the betrayal. It was the realization that Lily wasn't alone in this mess. There were far more people involved than I had thought, people who would never understand the consequences of their actions until it was too late. My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a door opening, and I turned to see Lily's husband, David, standing in the doorway. My heart skipped a beat. He looked nothing like the man I had once seen as a reliable, loving husband to my niece. His face was tense, his eyes darting between the two of us. He had heard everything. He had heard the confession, the painful admission of infidelity, and now it was all crashing down. David, I started, my voice trembling with uncertainty. I wasn't sure how to navigate this moment. We were just talking. David didn't respond at first. He simply stared at Lily, his eyes dark with anger. Then, his gaze shifted toward me, and for a brief moment, I saw something. Something so raw, so vulnerable in his eyes. But before I could make sense of it, he turned his attention back to Lily. You thought I didn't know? He spat, his voice dripping with contempt. You think I didn't know what you were doing? I knew all along, Lily, I knew. Lily's face crumbled as his words hit her like a ton of bricks. You knew? She whispered, her voice barely audible. You knew about Greg? He stepped forward, his eyes never leaving hers. Of course I knew. You think I didn't notice the late-night phone calls? The secretive looks? You thought I was stupid? I could see the anger building inside him, and I could feel the tension between them crackling like static electricity in the air. But then, something unexpected happened. Instead of reacting with more anger or accusation, David's expression softened for just a moment. I didn't want to believe it, he said, his voice quieter now, almost like he was talking to himself. I wanted to save us. I wanted to believe we could fix things, but now, he trailed off, the pain in his voice unmistakable. I didn't know what to say. What could I say? This wasn't a situation that could be fixed with simple words, with empty reassurances. The damage had been done. But in that moment, something shifted inside me. The anger, the betrayal, it all melted away. What I saw in front of me wasn't just a broken marriage. It wasn't just a shattered relationship. It was two people, caught in a cycle of pain and regret, desperately trying to hold on to something they didn't even know how to fix anymore. Lily, David, I said softly, taking a step toward them. You both have a choice. You can let this destroy you. Or you can try to rebuild. It won't be easy, it won't be fast. But if you truly want to save this, you need to start by being honest with each other. No more secrets. No more lies. They both looked at me, and for a long moment no one spoke. The room was thick with the weight of what had been said, with the enormity of what still needed to be said. But in that silence, I realized something. Sometimes the hardest part isn't facing the truth, it's admitting that you're willing to change, to fight for something you thought was beyond repair. And whether they chose to fix it or walk away, the decision was theirs to make. But I knew one thing for certain: nothing would ever be the same again.